My name is Stephanie, and I am 34 years old. I built a successful career in finance, but family always came first for me. When my sister Allison got engaged, I promised to fund her dream wedding, all $75,000 of it. We were closer than most siblings, especially after raising her myself. I never imagined her future in-laws would see me as an embarrassment to their prestigious family. When I discovered my name had been removed from the guest list, I made a decision that would change everything. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button. And tell me if you have ever gone above and beyond for family only to be hurt in return. Our parents died when I was 20 and Allison was only 12. A drunk driver took them both in an instant, leaving me to become both sister and mother to a grieving preteen. The transition was brutal. I had just started college with dreams of becoming an architect, but those plans evaporated overnight. Instead of drafting building designs, I was figuring out how to file insurance paperwork and cook nutritious dinners on a tight budget. I dropped out of college and worked 3 jobs simultaneously. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening receptionist at a dental office, and weekend retail. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. But watching Allison grow and thrive made every exhausting moment worthwhile. I attended every parent-teacher conference, helped with science projects, and cheered at each soccer game despite my bone-deep exhaustion. Over the years, I clawed my way up professionally. Starting as an administrative assistant at a small financial firm, I worked relentlessly, taking night classes in finance and business management. By the time Allison graduated high school, I had become a junior analyst. When she finished college, I had reached a management position that finally provided financial stability. Now, at 34, I serve as a senior investment manager at one of the top financial firms in Boston. Allison met Bryce during her final year of graduate school. He came from old money, with generations of wealth and privilege behind him. Their first date was at a charity gala his family hosted. While Allison gushed about his charm and confidence, something about him unsettled me from the beginning. The way he spoke about people working service jobs. The dismissive tone when Allison mentioned our modest upbringing, the constant name-dropping of family connections. Despite my reservations, I supported their relationship. Who was I to judge? Allison seemed genuinely happy, laughing more than I had seen in years. Her eyes sparkled whenever she talked about their future together. That sparkle meant everything to me. Meeting his family for the first time confirmed my worst suspicions. Their mansion in Beacon Hill literally took my breath away, not with its beauty, but with its ostentation. Everything screamed wealth, from the imported marble floors to the original paintings by artists whose names I recognized from museum visits. Victoria, his mother, greeted me with a thin smile that never reached her eyes. She looked me up and down, taking in my department store dress with barely concealed disdain. Richard, his father, barely acknowledged my presence, too busy discussing some business merger with cousins who all seemed to work at the family investment firm. The entire evening felt like navigating a minefield of subtle insults disguised as curiosity about my background. Questions like, "And where did you summer as a child?" or "Which prep school did you attend?" were designed to highlight the class gap between our families. Still, I smiled through it all for Allison. She glowed that night, perfectly at ease in this world that felt so foreign to me. Perhaps she was adapting better than I ever could. Maybe this was the life she deserved after all she had been through. 6 months later, Allison burst into my apartment on a Tuesday evening, tears streaming down her face. For a terrible moment, I thought something had gone wrong. Then she thrust her left hand forward, revealing a diamond ring that must have cost more than my annual salary. Bryce had proposed during a private helicopter tour over the city, landing on his family vineyard where both families waited to celebrate. Well, his entire family and none of mine, since I was the only family Allison had left. That detail stung. but I pushed the feeling aside. This was her moment of joy, not the time for my insecurities. We stayed up all night drinking champagne, looking at wedding magazines, and dreaming about the big day. Somewhere between the second and third bottle, I made the offer that would eventually lead to disaster. "Let me pay for the wedding," I said impulsively. "All of it. Whatever you want." Allison initially protested. She knew about the college fund I had been saving for my own future children, the down payment I had been accumulating for my dream house. But I insisted. What was the point of financial security if not to give happiness to those you love most? Besides, I reasoned, I had already missed the chance to give her a normal childhood with 2 parents. This was my opportunity to give her something perfect, untainted by tragedy. The wedding planning began immediately. I set up meetings with the top wedding planner in Boston, created spreadsheets for budgeting, and took days off work to tour venues. The initial estimate came to around $50,000, which seemed reasonable for an upscale wedding. I signed contracts as the financially responsible party, putting down deposits from my savings account. One of my most treasured memories from this period was our day searching for her wedding dress. We visited 5 boutiques before finding the perfect gown at a small, exclusive atelier. When Allison stepped out of the dressing room in that ivory silk creation with delicate lace detailing, we both burst into tears. For a moment, I could almost feel our mother in the room with us, witnessing this milestone. The dress cost $7,000, but the look on her face made it worth every penny. As weeks passed, my own vacation plans were postponed indefinitely. The house hunting appointments were canceled. My financial advisor frowned during our quarterly meeting, warning that I was overextending myself. I brushed off his concerns. This was about family, about giving Allison the fresh start she deserved. What greater investment could there be? The first real indication of trouble came 3 months before the wedding date. I had found the perfect venue. A stunning historic estate with beautiful gardens overlooking the ocean. The property featured a renovated barn with crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, and enough space for the 200 guests Allison and Bryce had on their preliminary list. At $6,000 for the weekend rental, it represented a significant portion of the budget. But the photographs would be priceless. I scheduled a tour with the event coordinator, Margaret, inviting Allison and Bryce to join. Unexpectedly, Victoria inserted herself into the appointment, arriving with her personal assistant in tow. From the moment we stepped onto the grounds, Victoria found flaws everywhere. The garden pathways were too uneven for proper ladies' shoes. The barn, despite its recent renovation, was still essentially a barn, darling, no matter how many chandeliers you hang. The catering kitchen was woefully inadequate for a proper service staff. Margaret maintained professional composure, but I caught her confused glances my way. After all, I was the one signing the contracts and checks. Victoria spoke as though her approval was the only one that mattered. When I gently pointed out the venue had hosted presidential fundraisers and celebrity weddings, Victoria patted my hand condescendingly. "Stephanie, dear, those people might not know any better, but the Hamilton family has standards to uphold. We have a reputation in certain circles." The comment stung, implying I existed outside those certain circles and lacked the refinement to recognize quality. More troubling was Allison's silence. My sister, once so quick to defend me, stared at her shoes, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict her future mother-in-law. The venue issue resolved temporarily when Victoria discovered the estate had once hosted a distant cousin's wedding. Suddenly, the shabby barn transformed into a charming rustic space with character. We signed the contract that day, with Victoria noting loudly that they would simply have to bring in proper decorators to elevate the space. A week later, I received an invitation to dinner at the Hamilton residence to discuss wedding details. The formal card specified business attire, which required me to purchase a new outfit suitable for their standards. The evening began awkwardly with cocktails in their intimidating living room. Richard dominated conversation with tales of his recent hunting expedition with a senator, while Victoria critiqued the latest charity gala decorations. When we finally moved to discussion of the wedding guest list, things deteriorated rapidly. Richard unfurled a list of names that seemed endless. "These are non-negotiable," he declared. Business associates, political connections, family friends going back generations. The Hamilton wedding is the social event of the season, not just a family gathering. Their list alone contained 150 names. When combined with Bryce's fraternity brothers, distant cousins, and family friends, the total approached 300. My carefully constructed budget would need significant expansion. The original plan was for 200 guests maximum, I reminded everyone gently. Each additional guest adds to catering costs. Seating requirements favor expenses. Victoria waved away my concerns as though swatting an annoying insect. "Stephanie, this is hardly the time to be pinching pennies. This is your sister's one special day." The phrase pinching pennies to describe my $75,000 contribution made my blood boil, but I maintained composure. I turned to Allison, hoping for support, only to find her enthusiastically reviewing the extended guest list with Bryce. "Some of these people could be great connections for my career," she whispered excitedly. "The governor might actually come." In that moment, I realized I was fighting this battle alone. The evening concluded with a reluctant agreement to expand the guest capacity, adding another $8,000 to the budget. Richard magnanimously offered to split the difference by covering the alcohol for the additional guests, a gesture presented as extraordinary generosity but representing a fraction of the increased costs. Driving home that night, a knot formed in my stomach. Something fundamental had shifted, though I couldn't quite name it yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. "Thank you for being so flexible. Love you." The message should have warmed my heart, but instead left me feeling strangely hollow. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Choices we had originally made together were gradually altered. The elegant, simple floral arrangements were deemed sparse and replaced with elaborate centerpieces costing triple the original quote. The carefully selected menu featuring local, seasonal ingredients was scrapped in favor of imported delicacies and premium cuts of meat. The tasteful string quartet was supplemented with a 12-piece band for the reception. Each change came with the same refrain: the Hamiltons have a certain standard to maintain. My role increasingly felt like that of a silent financier rather than the sister of the bride. When the catering company called to confirm the menu changes, they seemed confused about who had authority to make decisions. Despite my name on the contract, they had received updated instructions from Victoria. The culmination of these early warning signs occurred during what should have been a simple cake tasting. I arrived at the bakery at the appointed time, excited to share this experience with Allison. After waiting 30 minutes, I called her cell phone, only to have it go straight to voicemail. The baker appeared apologetic. "I believe the rest of your party has already completed the tasting," she explained uncomfortably. "Mrs. Hamilton called yesterday to reschedule for earlier this morning." My confusion must have been evident because she quickly added, "They selected the 7-tier fondant design with gold leaf detailing. Mrs. Hamilton mentioned you would handle the payment details." The cake they had chosen cost nearly $3,000, more than double our original budget for dessert. More painful than the price was the realization that I had been deliberately excluded from the decision. When I confronted Allison later that evening, her explanation cut deep. Victoria thought it would be more efficient with fewer opinions in the room. "You are so busy with work, Steph. We were just trying to respect your time." The lie was transparent. We both knew I had taken the entire day off specifically for wedding appointments. Before I could press further, my phone rang with Victoria's number displayed on screen. Her voice came through crisp and accusatory. "Stephanie, the florist tells me you question the centerpiece order. I must say I find it extremely distressing that you would interfere with arrangements we have already finalized. Allison is absolutely devastated by your attempt to downgrade her special day. I glanced at Allison, who had the grace to look uncomfortable but remained silent. In that moment, I realized just how much ground I had already lost in this subtle power struggle. The wedding was slipping away from me, contract signatures notwithstanding. The question was how much further this pattern would extend, and what I would do when pushed to my breaking point. The situation deteriorated rapidly in the weeks that followed. My phone buzzed one Saturday morning with an Instagram notification. Allison had posted a series of photos tagged pre-wedding photoshoot dreams. There she was, radiant in a flowing white sundress, posing with Bryce against the backdrop of the Boston Public Garden. Victoria and Richard appeared in several shots, along with Bryce's siblings and cousins. My stomach dropped. I had not been invited or even informed about this photoshoot. When I called Allison, her phone went straight to voicemail. 3 hours later, she texted back, "So sorry. It was super last minute. Victoria arranged it with her photographer friend. We'll send you all the pics later." The exclusion stung, but I tried to rationalize it away. Perhaps it truly was last minute. Maybe they assumed I was busy with work. I suggested dinner that evening to catch up on wedding details, but Allison replied that she was having dinner with Bryce's family to review the photos. She promised to reschedule soon. Over the next 2 weeks, Allison canceled our plans 3 separate times. Once for a spontaneous wine tasting with Victoria to select reception beverages. Another time for an impromptu meeting with the wedding planner that Victoria had arranged. The third cancellation came with no explanation beyond something came up. Our text conversations grew increasingly brief and perfunctory. My detailed questions about wedding arrangements received one-word replies or vague assurances that everything is handled. When we did speak by phone, Allison seemed distracted and eager to end the conversation. The distance growing between us became impossible to ignore when Victoria called me directly one Tuesday afternoon. I stepped away from an important meeting to take the call, expecting urgent wedding business. "Stephanie," Victoria began without preamble, "I am extremely disappointed to learn you have refused to increase the budget for the videographer package. This was news to me." "I have not refused anything," I replied carefully. "In fact, no one has discussed changing the videography package with me." Victoria made a sound of impatience. "We require the premium package with drone footage and a feature-length edit. The basic package you approved is embarrassingly inadequate. The additional cost is only $4,000. Only $4,000. As if that sum were pocket change rather than a month of my mortgage payments. My patience finally began to fray. "Victoria, I am already contributing $75,000 to this wedding. The original budget we all agreed upon was $50,000. Every change and upgrade has come from your family, not mine, yet I am expected to cover all additional costs." "Well," she replied icily, "if you truly loved your sister, these financial concerns would be secondary. Perhaps your priorities require examination." The implication that my love could be measured by my willingness to empty my bank account left me speechless with anger. Before I could formulate a response that would not burn bridges, Victoria continued, "Frankly, Stephanie, we have been very patient with your involvement given the circumstances. Not everyone would be so accommodating." "What circumstances?" I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. "Let us be candid. Your background and position are not what we would typically associate with. Your manners are adequate, but your understanding of certain social nuances is lacking. We have made allowances out of respect for Allison's attachment to you." The condescension in her voice made my hand tighten around the phone. Each word was carefully chosen to remind me of my place outside their elite circle. In Victoria's world, my very presence at this wedding was a concession rather than a right, despite my emotional and financial investment. "I need to speak with Allison," I said finally. She is quite busy with preparations, Victoria replied. I will have her call when convenient. Allison did not call that day, nor the next. When she finally reached out 3 days later, it was with a voice message left while I was in a meeting. Hey Steph, just checking in. Things are super busy with wedding stuff. Victoria mentioned you had concerns about the video package. Can you just approve the upgrade so we can move forward? Love you, talk soon. No acknowledgement of Victoria's insulting comments. No recognition of the financial strain. Just a request for more money and a casual brush-off. I tried calling back immediately, but the call went to voicemail. This pattern repeated throughout the day. When we finally connected that evening, I could hear voices in the background, suggesting she was with the Hamilton family again. Allison, we need to talk about what happened with Victoria, I began. Can we not do this now? She interrupted, voice low. I am with Bryce's family. Victoria was just trying to help coordinate things. She insulted me, I pressed. She suggested I do not belong in your wedding because of my background. Allison sighed, the sound crackling through the phone. You are overreacting. Victoria is just particular about how things should be done. This is stressful for everyone. It seems particularly stressful for my bank account, I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. If money is the issue, just say so, Allison snapped. I thought this was your gift to me, not something you planned to hold over my head. The accusation felt like a slap. After everything I had sacrificed, both recently and throughout our lives together, how could she believe I was the one being petty or selfish? I will talk to you tomorrow when you are alone, I said finally. Fine. I need to go. The line went dead before I could respond. The next evening, Allison arrived at my apartment with a forced smile and a peace offering of wine. For a brief moment, it felt like old times as we settled on my couch with glasses in hand. But the ease between us had evaporated, replaced by a tension neither of us acknowledged immediately. I thought I was supposed to try on my bridesmaid dress this weekend, I said, breaking the silence. The final fitting is scheduled for next week. Allison swirled her wine, avoiding my gaze. About that, there has been a slight change in the bridal party arrangement. My heart sank. What kind of change? Bryce's cousin Melissa is flying in from London. She and Bryce were really close growing up, and his parents thought it would be special to include her. Since we already had 6 bridesmaids and 6 groomsmen. She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Someone had to go, and that someone was me. You are removing me as a bridesmaid, I stated flatly. Not removing, Allison protested. Just shifting roles. You will still be doing a reading during the ceremony. Victoria found this beautiful poem she thinks would be perfect. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Not only was I being demoted from bridesmaid, but Victoria was selecting my role in the ceremony. The systematic erasure of my importance in this wedding, in my sister's life, could not be more complete. This is not about Melissa, I said quietly. This is about Victoria and Richard not wanting me visible in the wedding party. Be honest with me. Allison. Color flooded her cheeks. They think it would look awkward in photos, she admitted in a rush. The age gap between us, the fact that you do not fit the aesthetic they are going for. Victoria mentioned it might be uncomfortable for you anyway, trying to bond with the other bridesmaids who are all from our social circle. Our social circle. Not my social circle or even our shared connections, but the elite world she now considered herself part of. The distinction was subtle but devastating. And you agreed, I said. Not a question, but a confirmation. You are not making this easy. Allison's voice rose in frustration. You have been difficult throughout this process, questioning every decision. Making Victoria feel like she has to justify everything to you. This would all be so much simpler if you would just try to fit in with the Hamiltons instead of constantly reminding everyone you are an outsider. The words hung in the air between us. Impossible to take back. In that moment, I realized how completely Allison had been absorbed into the Hamilton worldview. where worth was measured by pedigree and social standing rather than love and loyalty. The sister I had raised, who once shared pizza on the floor of our tiny apartment while we dreamed about the future, now saw me as an embarrassing reminder of a past she was eager to escape. Our argument escalated into the first true fight we had had in years. Accusations flew from both sides, tears were shed, and old wounds reopened. By the time Allison stormed out, slamming the door behind her, something fundamental had broken between us. The question was whether it could ever be repaired, and what would happen as the wedding date drew closer with this new, painful reality between us. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a formal invitation to dinner at the Hamilton estate. The heavy cream cardstock envelope arrived by courier rather than regular mail, underscoring the importance of the occasion. After the bridesmaid demotion and weeks of strained communication with Allison, I approached the evening with apprehension, but also hope. Perhaps this was an olive branch, an attempt to smooth over tensions before the big day. I selected my outfit with meticulous care. A conservative navy dress that projected professionalism without attempting to compete with the Hamiltons' wealth. The pearls at my neck had belonged to our mother, a touchstone of strength for difficult situations. As I drove through the imposing gates of their estate, I rehearsed conciliatory phrases and reminded myself that this was all for Allison's happiness. The dinner began cordially enough. Richard offered me a glass of wine from what he described as a small vineyard in Bordeaux that most Americans have never heard of. Victoria commented that my dress was quite appropriate, the faint praise clearly the best I could expect. Bryce's siblings, Madison and Connor, maintained polite but distant conversation, while his elderly grandmother observed me with undisguised curiosity, as though I were an exotic specimen in a zoo. Allison sat beside Bryce, wearing a new designer dress I had never seen before. She smiled nervously when I entered, but had barely spoken directly to me since. Throughout the elaborate 5-course meal, conversation flowed around me rather than including me. Business deals, vacation homes, private school anecdotes, political connections, all topics selected to highlight their world, a world where I had no place. When the conversation briefly turned to my career, Richard's response cut deep. Banking is such interesting work, he mused, though I had clearly explained I worked in investment management, not banking. A stable profession for someone of your background. Not glamorous, of course, but reliable. Stephanie has actually received several industry awards, Allison interjected. A brief flash of the sister I remembered. Her firm manages portfolios for some major institutional clients. Victoria patted her hand. Darling, no need to elaborate. We are all impressed that Stephanie has done so well for herself, given her starting point. My starting point. As though beginning life without wealthy parents was a handicap to be overcome rather than the reality for most Americans. I swallowed my retort with a sip of wine, reminding myself why I was enduring this subtle barrage of insults. After dessert, while coffee was being served in the drawing room, Victoria gestured for me to follow her into the adjacent study. The wood-paneled room with its leather-bound books and hunting trophies felt like a stage set for the conversation to come. Stephanie, Victoria began once the door closed behind us. I believe we should speak frankly about the wedding. I agree, I replied, relieved at the prospect of clearing the air. There have been some miscommunications and hurt feelings that we should address before Allison's big day. Victoria's thin smile never reached her eyes. Yes, well, that is precisely what I wished to discuss. Richard and I have given this considerable thought, and we believe your presence at the ceremony itself may be somewhat disruptive. The statement was so unexpected that for a moment I thought I had misheard. Disruptive? I do not understand. The wedding has evolved into a significant social and business event, she continued smoothly. Many of our guests are people of considerable influence. The governor and his wife, 2 senators, the chairman of Boston General Hospital's board. The media will likely be present outside the venue. She paused, examining her manicured nails. Given these circumstances, we feel the family presentation needs to be cohesive. Your involvement has been appreciated, truly, but your continued visibility during the event itself presents certain challenges to the narrative. The meaning finally crystallized. You do not want me at the wedding at all, I stated flatly. I would not put it so crudely, Victoria replied, looking affronted. We simply feel it would be best for all concerned if your participation were more behind the scenes. Your financial contribution has been generous, and for that the family is grateful. Blood rushed to my face. I am not a donor or a sponsor. I am the bride's sister, her only living family. I raised her after our parents died. Victoria's expression hardened slightly. Yes, and that history is precisely the issue. The constant reminder of tragedy, of a different life. Allison is embarking on a new chapter. Certain associations are better left in the past. Each word felt like a physical blow. I was being erased not just from the wedding but from Allison's life story, relegated to an uncomfortable footnote rather than recognized as the person who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at happiness. Does Allison know about this conversation? I asked. Voice barely steady. Allison understands the importance of presenting a united front to our social circle, Victoria replied. She agrees that minimizing potential complications is in everyone's best interest. I need to hear this from her, I insisted. Victoria sighed with theatrical patience. Very well. She opened the study door and called for Allison, who appeared moments later looking apprehensive. The guilt in her eyes told me everything before she spoke a single word. Is it true? I asked quietly. You do not want me at your wedding. That is not exactly. Allison began, then stopped, visibly struggling. It is just that things have gotten so complicated. The guest list had to be trimmed due to some VIP additions. Victoria thought it might be easier for everyone if I what, Allison? Disappeared? Pretended I do not exist? Handed over $75,000 and quietly stepped aside so you can play princess with your new family. You are making this about money again, she accused, tears welling in her eyes. This is my wedding day, Stephanie. It should be what I want. And you want me gone, I finished for her. The silence that followed was answer enough. I left the Hamilton estate in a daze, barely remembering the drive home. The full impact hit me the next morning when I opened my email to find a message from the wedding planner. The subject line read, Updated guest list confirmation. With trembling fingers, I opened the attachment and scrolled through the alphabetized names. My own was conspicuously absent. They had actually done it. Not just suggested my absence, but formally removed me from the guest list. The planner's accompanying note was professional but awkward, per instructions from the bride's family. We have updated the seating arrangements accordingly. Please confirm this meets with your approval as the financially responsible party. I called Allison immediately. After 4 rings, she answered, her voice wary. How could you? I asked without preamble. Steph, please try to understand, she began, sounding exhausted. This wedding has become something bigger than us. The Hamiltons have connections that could set up my entire future, Bryce's future. Sometimes compromises have to be made. Removing your only sister from your wedding is not a compromise, Allison. It is a betrayal. You are still paying for it, are not you? She snapped, frustration breaking through. Is that not what you wanted? To give me the perfect day? Why does it matter if you are physically there or not? The question left me speechless. In Allison's mind, my role had been reduced to financial provider. My emotional connection to her severed as easily as writing a check. Victoria says you can still transfer the final payments to the vendors. Allison continued into my silence. Everything is set up. You do not need to do anything else. Except disappear, I said quietly. Do not be dramatic, she sighed. It is one day. You can still be in my life. Just not this part of it. As the conversation continued, the depth of the transformation became clear. Allison, the sister I had raised with values of loyalty and gratitude, had been completely subsumed into the Hamilton value system. Money, status, and appearances now outweighed family bonds. The final blow came when she suggested I could watch the professional wedding video afterward to feel included. That night, alone in my apartment, I moved through grief stages with dizzying speed. Denial gave way to rage, then to a deep, hollow sadness. I pulled out photo albums, tracing our journey from traumatized orphans to the adults we had become. Had I done something wrong in raising her? Had I somehow failed to instill the values I thought we shared? Around midnight, as I sorted through the wedding contracts spread across my dining table, a cold clarity descended. Each document bore my signature. Each vendor had been paid, at least partially, with my money. The remaining balances, totaling nearly $30,000, were scheduled for payment the week of the wedding. In that moment of painful lucidity, I made the decision that would reverberate through both our lives. If I was not welcome at the celebration I had sacrificed so much to provide, perhaps there should not be a celebration at all. With hands that no longer trembled, I began composing emails to each vendor. The morning after my decision, I awoke with unwavering resolve. Coffee in hand, I created a spreadsheet listing every vendor contracted for the wedding. Venue, caterer, florist, photographer, videographer, DJ, baker, rental company for tables and chairs, transportation service, bartending staff, hair and makeup artists, and the wedding coordinator who tied it all together. Beside each name, I noted contract terms, cancellation policies, and contact information. My first call was to my attorney, Jackson, who had handled my parents' estate years before. After explaining the situation, I asked the critical question, legally, where do I stand if I cancel these contracts? Since your name is on all documentation as the financially responsible party, you have the legal right to modify or cancel these agreements, he confirmed. However, cancellation fees will apply based on individual contract terms. This close to the event date, expect to lose most deposits at minimum. Money that would normally matter greatly to me now seemed inconsequential compared to the principle at stake. I authorized Jackson to draft a formal letter I could forward to vendors explaining the cancellation was not due to any dissatisfaction with their services. My next call was to Margaret, the venue coordinator at the estate. Her surprise was evident. Ms. Lewis, are you certain about this? The wedding is less than 2 weeks away. All preparations are nearly complete. I understand the timing is unusual, I replied, maintaining professional composure despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. However, circumstances have changed significantly. I am prepared to accept all cancellation penalties as outlined in our contract. After a pause, Margaret spoke more gently. If you do not mind my asking, is everything all right? This is quite unexpected. Something in her tone, a genuine concern lacking in all my recent interactions with the wedding party, cracked my carefully maintained facade. Before I could stop myself, I gave her a brief summary of the situation, my exclusion from the guest list despite funding the entire event. I see, she said after a moment, audible disapproval in her voice. That context does clarify things. I had noticed some unusual dynamics during planning meetings. For what it is worth, I think you are handling this with remarkable restraint. Her validation, coming from someone who had witnessed the gradual takeover of the wedding planning, strengthened my resolve. We proceeded to review cancellation procedures, and she agreed to keep the situation confidential until I had contacted all vendors. Throughout that day, I methodically worked through my list. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. Shock from the vendor, my calm explanation without emotional details, discussion of financial penalties, and a request for discretion. Many expressed sympathy, particularly those who had witnessed Victoria's demanding behavior during the planning process. The florist even confided that she had been considering dropping the contract herself due to the impossible demands and disrespect shown to her staff. With each call, a mixture of emotions washed through me: grief for the relationship with my sister that seemed irreparably damaged, guilt over the dramatic action I was taking, but also, increasingly, a sense of reclaiming my dignity. For months, I had allowed myself to be marginalized, insulted, and eventually erased from an event I was financing. This final act, while admittedly extreme, was perhaps the first time I had honored my own worth throughout the entire process. The most difficult conversation was with the wedding planner, Charlotte, who had coordinated all aspects of the event. "This creates an extremely uncomfortable situation," she noted after I explained my decision. "The Hamilton family has been challenging to work with, but I have professional obligations to both parties." "I understand your position," I acknowledged. "Legally, since I am the contracting party, these cancellations are within my rights. However, I recognize the professional awkwardness this creates for you." We negotiated a solution. Charlotte would receive her full fee regardless of the cancellation, in exchange for maintaining neutrality and not alerting the Hamilton family until I had completed all vendor cancellations. She agreed, adding quietly that in 15 years of planning high-end weddings, she had never encountered a family quite like the Hamiltons. By evening, I had successfully contacted every vendor except one: the baker. Their office was closed for a family emergency, according to their voicemail. I scheduled this final call for first thing the following morning. That night, alone in my apartment, the magnitude of what I had done began to sink in. I had effectively canceled a wedding that 200 people were planning to attend. The social fallout would be significant. The personal consequences in my relationship with Allison might be permanent. For a brief, wavering moment, I considered reversing course, calling everyone back to reinstate the contracts. But then I remembered Victoria's cold voice: certain associations are better left in the past. I remembered Allison's casual dismissal: why does it matter if you are physically there or not? The clarity returned, along with a steely determination to see this through. I spent the evening preparing for the aftermath. I drafted emails to my closest friends explaining my actions, knowing they would hear distorted versions from others. I wrote a longer letter to Allison that I did not intend to send immediately, articulating the years of love and sacrifice that had led to this breaking point. I contacted my building security to alert them about possible unwelcome visitors in the coming days. Finally, I booked a cabin at a remote lake resort 3 hours from Boston, checking in under my middle name. I would need a sanctuary from the storm about to break. The cabin had spotty cell service and no Wi-Fi, a feature that now seemed perfect rather than inconvenient. I packed a bag with essentials for a week away. The next morning, I completed the final cancellation with the baker, who was professionally courteous, if somewhat confused by the last-minute change. With that call, the dismantling of Allison's dream wedding was complete. According to my calculations, I had recovered approximately $35,000 of my investment, with the remainder lost to non-refundable deposits and cancellation fees. An expensive lesson, but one I could not put a price tag on. I left my apartment at noon, 12 days before the wedding date. As I drove toward the secluded cabin, I turned off my phone completely, severing my connection to the world I was leaving behind. The highway stretched before me, carrying me away from the pain of betrayal and toward something I had neglected for too long: self-respect. Whatever chaos would unfold in my absence, I had made my statement in the only language the Hamiltons understood: money and social standing. Now I needed time to heal from the wounds inflicted by those I had loved most. The morning of what should have been Allison's wedding day dawned crisp and clear at the lakeside cabin. I watched the sunrise from the small wooden dock, coffee mug warming my hands against the early autumn chill. For nearly 2 weeks, I had existed in a peaceful bubble, hiking forest trails, reading novels by the fireplace, and sleeping more soundly than I had in months. The cabin had become a sanctuary for my wounded spirit. That morning, I finally powered on my phone, bracing for the inevitable deluge. It took several minutes for the notifications to stop flooding in. 173 text messages, 94 missed calls, 62 voicemails, and countless email and social media alerts. Most were from Allison and members of the Hamilton family, but I also noticed messages from mutual friends and even a few wedding vendors checking on me. I skipped the Hamilton communications for the moment, instead opening a text from my closest friend, Laurel, who had been aware of my growing concerns throughout the wedding planning process. Total chaos here, her message read, timestamped just 2 hours after the ceremony should have begun. Arrived at venue to find doors locked, no staff. Guests milling around confused. Victoria having public meltdown. Allison in tears. Bryce family trying to blame venue but truth spreading fast. People talking about how you were uninvited despite paying. Many actually on your side. Call when safe. I scrolled through other messages from mutual friends, piecing together the scene. Apparently, guests had arrived at the historic estate to find the gates locked with a simple "closed for private event" sign that had been left from another function. No staff greeted them. No signs directed them to a ceremony location. The confused crowd gathered in the parking area, checking phones for possible miscommunication about the date or venue. According to Laurel's detailed play-by-play, Victoria had initially insisted there must be some mistake, attempting to call the venue manager with no success. Richard had tried using his connections to resolve the situation, making aggressive calls to people who might know the property owners. Meanwhile, Allison had remained in the limousine, refusing to believe what was happening. As guests waited in the parking lot for nearly an hour, the truth had begun to emerge. Someone connected to the catering company mentioned the event had been canceled days earlier. This information spread quickly through the crowd, along with rumors about why. My absence became conspicuous, leading to questions that the Hamilton family struggled to answer coherently. A text from another friend described the scene. Victoria told everyone there was a venue mix-up at first. When that fell apart, Richard claimed you had mental health issues. But then someone mentioned you were not even invited despite paying for everything. Whole thing became super awkward. Half the guests left for brunch instead. Others stayed to witness the train wreck. I took a deep breath and finally opened the first message from Allison, sent the day after my disappearance but 3 days before vendors would have begun revealing the cancellations. Where are you? Been calling nonstop. Need to finalize details with vendors. Please call immediately. The tone shifted dramatically in messages from the day the Hamilton family discovered the truth. Approximately 1 week before the wedding date. How could you do this? All vendors saying you canceled everything. Venue, food, flowers, everything. Call me now. This is unforgivable. We can still fix this if you answer your phone. Mom and Dad are consulting attorneys. This is fraud. You had NO right. The messages became increasingly desperate as the wedding date approached, alternating between threats and pleading. Please, Stephanie, I know you are hurt, but this is cruel. We can work this out. Just call me. Dad has connections with the DA. Criminal charges possible. Last chance to make this right. The final message, sent an hour after the ceremony should have begun, simply read, I will never forgive you for this. You have ruined my life. Victoria and Richard's messages were predictably threatening, promising lawsuits, criminal charges, and social destruction. Bryce had sent a single, scathing text, You psychotic bitch. You have destroyed Allison's happiness because of your pathetic jealousy. Expect to hear from our attorneys. I set the phone aside and walked to the edge of the lake, processing the impact of my actions. The satisfaction I had anticipated felt hollow in the face of such raw pain. Yet I could not bring myself to regret the decision that had finally established my self-worth after months of erosion. Returning to the cabin, I checked social media briefly to gauge the public fallout. Allison had posted a tearful update the evening of the failed wedding. Devastated to announce our wedding did not take place today due to a malicious act by someone I trusted completely. Too heartbroken for details. Please respect our privacy during this painful time. The comments section had quickly become a battlefield. Many expressed sympathy and outrage on her behalf. Others, particularly those who had heard rumors about my uninvitation despite funding the event, defended my actions or at least questioned the full story. The controversy had spread beyond our immediate circle, with screenshots appearing in local community groups discussing the wedding cancellation scandal involving a prominent Boston family. Richard and Victoria had maintained complete social media silence, likely on advice from their public relations team. Several society pages, however, carried brief mentions of the unfortunate cancellation of the highly anticipated Hamilton-Mercer nuptials, with carefully worded statements about family circumstances necessitating postponement. Perhaps most surprising were the messages from wedding vendors. The florist had sent a kind note, while professionally I cannot condone last-minute cancellations. Personally, I understand your position entirely. The disrespect shown to you throughout this process was appalling. Wishing you healing. Even Charlotte, the wedding planner caught in the middle, had written, "The situation could have been handled differently by all parties. But I want you to know that many industry professionals witnessed your consistent generosity and patience in the face of extraordinary demands. Whatever comes next, hold your head high." These messages provided unexpected validation. The vendors had been silent witnesses to my gradual marginalization, observing as the Hamiltons systematically pushed me from the center of my sister's life to its outermost edges. Their perspective confirmed I had not imagined or exaggerated the mistreatment. Over the following days, I monitored the situation from a distance, extending my cabin stay by another week. The threatened lawsuits never materialized, likely because Jackson had confirmed my legal right to cancel contracts bearing my signature. The social fallout continued to evolve in complex ways, with the story spreading through Boston's upper circles in various forms. 3 weeks after the non-wedding, I finally returned to my apartment, having arranged for a security service to check the property first. Inside, I found 5 handwritten letters that had been slipped under my door. 4 were from mutual friends expressing support, if also confusion about my actions. The 5th was from Allison, its contents unexpectedly measured given her earlier digital fury. "Stephanie, I cannot pretend to understand or forgive what you did. The humiliation and pain you caused was beyond anything I thought you capable of. But in the quiet moments between anger and grief, I find myself wondering how we reached this point. What you did was wrong, but perhaps I failed to see how my actions affected you. When you are ready, we should talk. Not for reconciliation, which may be impossible, but for closure. Allison." The note represented the first acknowledgement, however slight, that she might bear some responsibility for the broken relationship. It was not an apology, but it was a crack in the fortress of righteous indignation the Hamiltons had constructed around her. I placed the letter in my desk drawer, not yet ready to respond, but unwilling to discard this fragile thread between us. Whatever came next would require time, reflection, and a commitment to honesty from both sides. The wedding day disaster had forced a reckoning that perhaps needed to happen, painful though the process had been. Whether this would ultimately destroy us or forge a stronger, more authentic connection remained to be seen. A month after the wedding that never was, my doorbell rang unexpectedly on a Sunday afternoon. Through the peephole, I saw Allison standing alone in the hallway, looking smaller and less polished than I had seen her in months. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup that had become her uniform in the Hamilton world. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. For a moment, I considered not answering. Our only communication since my return had been a brief text exchange confirming we were both alive and well. But something in her posture, A vulnerability I recognized from our childhood compelled me to open the door. We faced each other in silence before I stepped aside, wordlessly inviting her in. She perched awkwardly on the edge of my couch, the same spot where months earlier we had shared wine and wedding magazines, plotting the perfect celebration. "I got married," she said finally, lifting her left hand to show a simple gold band where the massive diamond had once been. "Last weekend. Just Bryce and me at the courthouse. No families, no friends." "Congratulations," I offered, unsure what response she wanted. Victoria and Richard were furious. Allison continued, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "They wanted us to reschedule the big production. Same guest list. Same connections to impress." But I could not face it. The humiliation of that day was actually clarifying. I remained silent, giving her space to continue this unexpected narrative. "I was so angry at you, Stephanie. I still am in many ways. What you did was extreme and public and devastating." She looked directly at me for the first time. "But these past weeks forced me to examine how we got there. How I allowed myself to become someone who would exclude her only sister, her only real family, from the most important day of her life." The acknowledgement, finally spoken aloud, hung between us like a tangible thing. I had spent weeks preparing defenses and justifications, but in the face of her admission, they seemed unnecessary. "The Hamiltons have a way of reshaping reality around them," Allison continued. "Every objection becomes unreasonable. Every boundary becomes an insult. I watched them do it to you. And I not only allowed it, I participated. By the time they suggested removing you from the guest list, it somehow seemed logical within their framework. You could have said no," I said quietly, the hurt still fresh despite her self-awareness. "I could have. I should have." She twisted her new wedding band nervously. "I got caught up in the fantasy they were selling. The connections, the status, the belonging. After feeling like an outsider for so much of our lives after losing mom and dad, suddenly I had this powerful family claiming me as their own." The explanation was not an excuse, but it provided context I had been missing. Allison, orphaned at 12, had spent her formative years as the girl with the tragic story, the one raised by her barely adult sister. The Hamiltons had offered her not just wealth, but legitimacy, a complete family structure to replace what she had lost. "Bryce and I have moved out of his parents' guest house," she continued. "We found an apartment in Cambridge, closer to the university where he teaches. It is small. Nothing like what Victoria had planned for us, but it is ours." This separation from the Hamilton influence surprised me. How did they take that decision? "About as well as the courthouse wedding," Allison replied with a wry smile. "Richard threatened to cut off Bryce's trust fund. Victoria cried about family loyalty, but Bryce stood firm. That day, when everything fell apart, he saw them clearly for perhaps the first time. How they treated the guests, how quickly they shifted blame, how they spoke about you. And how did Bryce feel about what I did?" I asked, curious about the man who had been largely a cipher throughout the wedding drama. "He was furious at first," she admitted. "But later, when I finally told him everything, how you had raised me, put me through college, supported me in every way possible only to be systematically pushed aside, he understood. Not that he condoned it, but he understood." We sat in silence again, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across my living room floor. The anger and hurt between us remained, but something else had emerged alongside it. A fragile recognition of shared wounds and mutual culpability. "I am not asking for forgiveness," Allison said finally. "What happened cannot be undone. But you're my sister, my only true family. I do not want to lose that forever. I do not know what happens next," I confessed. "I acted out of pain and humiliation, but I cannot pretend I did not choose to cause pain in return." "Maybe we start small," she suggested. "Coffee next week. No Hamiltons, no wedding talk. just sisters trying to remember who we were before all this. It was a modest proposal, nowhere near the closeness we had once shared. Yet it acknowledged what we both needed, time to rebuild trust that had been severely damaged from both sides. In the months that followed, Allison and I navigated a new, more careful relationship. Weekly coffee became occasional dinners. I met Bryce again in this new context, finding him more thoughtful and less pretentious away from his family's influence. He was pursuing tenure at the university, focusing on his academic work rather than his family connections. Allison had returned to her original career in education, teaching at a public elementary school rather than pursuing the private school administration role Victoria had arranged. The Hamiltons remained a complicated presence in their lives, but boundaries had been established. Sunday dinners at the estate became monthly, then optional. Holiday gatherings included compromise and mutual respect rather than automatic deference to Hamilton traditions. As for me, the experience transformed my approach to relationships fundamentally. I learned that love without boundaries is not generosity but self-erasure. My willingness to sacrifice everything, including my dignity, had enabled the dynamic that ultimately shattered our relationship. True love requires mutual respect, not just sacrifice. I also discovered unexpected strength in finally standing up for myself, however imperfectly. The $75,000 lost on the wedding became, in retrospect, an investment in my self-worth. An expensive lesson, certainly, but one that altered the course of my life in necessary ways. When friends ask if I regret my actions that day, I answer honestly. I regret the pain caused, but not the boundary finally established. Some bridges need to be burned before they can be rebuilt properly, with foundations of mutual respect rather than obligation and power imbalance. Today, Allison and I continue rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. The closeness we once shared may never fully return, but something new and perhaps more authentic has taken its place. We approach each other now as adults with separate lives, making conscious choices to be in each other's world rather than assuming unbreakable bonds. If you have ever found yourself disappearing to make others comfortable, sacrificing your dignity to keep peace, or financing your own erasure from spaces that should center your belonging, remember this: the price of admission should never be your self-respect. True family sees you, values you, and makes space for your whole self, not just what you can provide. What about you? Have you ever had to establish painful boundaries with loved ones? Did it heal your relationship or change it permanently? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult life lessons. Thank you for listening to my journey from sacrifice to self-respect, from enabling to establishing boundaries. Sometimes the hardest love is the love we finally give ourselves.